You and I with Rashmi Shetty is a human library audio podcast bringing in stories of people you and I can draw inspiration from. Welcome to the third season of this amazing story listening journey. Ordinary folks, extraordinary lives, their uniqueness and individuality, making them interesting to talk to and to listen to, each one of them completely connected to the voice in me and with motivational stories of moving beyond themselves to make a difference in the world. A reaffirmation of the fact: open your eyes wider. The world is far more beautiful when we acknowledge the presence of both you and I. Our guest today is Dalia Feldheim, an award winning creative brand builder, organization builder, and relentless result oriented executive with over 20 years of successful track record as a transformational leader at P&G and Electrolux. She has won over a dozen internal and external awards, including the Global Best Campaign and External at the Cannes and IFFY. Dalia is the founder of the P&G Women's Network in Moscow and Singapore and author of MOM, Managing Our Maternity, an internal P&G maternity guide which has been translated into 26 languages. Her first book as an author, Lead Like a Girl, promoting more feminine style of leadership with a foreword by Sheryl Sandberg, is a fantastic read. Today, Dalia is the founder of Flow Leadership Consultancy as well as Uppiness, which is Up Your Game at Work, an online happiness at work game co-developed with the Happiness Studies Academy. She is a sought-after international keynote speaker, executive coach, and organizational consultant on a mission to humanize the workspace and drive resilience and joy at work so more leaders who are men as well as women connect to their softer skills and lead like a girl. Listen in as Dalia shares her journey from her childhood to the inspirational leader that she is today. Positive in her outlook and amazing with the way she looks at life. Gratitude is one thing she says is extremely important. Loved her take on failure, where she said, "Failure is a skill I haven't yet acquired." Dalia, this is such an honor and pleasure to have you on You and I with Rashmi Shetty. We met years ago, but you have continued to stay in my mind. And your title of the book that you had presented in that online webinar in Shimantra, Lead Like a Girl, stayed with me. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you.
I'm now curious to know, what was little girl Dalia like, who stayed with you that even now, when you're a woman, you write Lead Like a Girl. What was your childhood like and where was it?
No, a lot of people ask me, first of all, why lead like a girl? Why not lead like a woman? And I think, the idea there is that when we're young, we think we're sure we're unstoppable, right? I was the feisty little one. I'm the younger daughter. Every time my brother would get in trouble, I was there. My mom used to be quite strict with us, but I was never scared of her. She always said that my brother ran and hid underneath a table, and I would stand there and argue until she was blue in the face. So my parents always said I have healthy chutzpah. It's a Yiddish word to mean, cheeky, brave, not afraid to challenge the norm. So I think, lead like a girl. I want the girls to remember how they were before we got kind of tempered, or, before we were taught what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, right? When we were our natural selves. Natural Dalia was, feisty, cheeky, not impolite. I was always very, a charmer. I was a really straight A student, so no one could ever be really cross with me. I remember once the headmaster, I didn't come with uniform, and he was like, and I stood there just arguing, why does having a uniform affect my marks or my ability to think? And we had a very deep conversation. And then at the end, I said, you know what, you convinced me, we're going to wear uniform tomorrow. But yeah, I was very active from a very, very young age. I started dancing when I was 3, and then at 6, I got into the gymnast, and then at 8, I was in the national team already. So literally, I was going to school, coming back, eating quickly, and then taking the taxi with 6 of my friends to the national kind of gymnast where we would work for 4 hours and then drive back. And I was the oldest there, so I was in charge of their homework and making sure that they, so we only had light on the way there. So we had an hour and a half to finish all our homework. And on the way back, it was singing and, and that was my life, very, very, very busy. And then from there, I became youth movement, activist. And then when I stopped being a competitive gymnast, I became a coach for young gymnasts. So my girls went to competitions. Um, so I was very, I look at my kids, none of them have that, I had this fire inside of me. My mom had to come in and say, enough studying, we're going to eat pizza. Like I had this immense drive. It wasn't competitive towards others. I didn't really care, what was going on, but it was like I had to be the best that I could possibly be. Um, so that's kind of, how I grew up, just with incredible stamina. I remember, where the oldest one in the group, it was harder for me to do things, and I would just go over the routine again and again until I got it right. And then at some stage, I mean, I started number 2 nationally because I got stuck in the rope with something stupid, and then my teammates actually became so good. And then I became number 4 and then number 6. And when I was number 6, meaning off the podium, I said, okay, then it's not worth it. I will now become a teacher and teach others. So that was a little bit kind of crazy stamina, chutzpah. Impossible is nothing, right? I don't take no for an answer. You close the door on me, I come in through the window. It's not that I was stubborn. I was just very determined, very determined. So that's little Dalia.
Oh my God. That's an ideal childhood. Every girl wishes she had. You had it all going your way. And in this journey where everything happened the way you wanted, because you said you were very determined, were there moments where you were forcefully stopped, which made you question that determination, question authority? Because you said you spoke to your headmaster, got your answer, you were convinced. So,
Yeah.
at a very young age, it was very clear to you that I need my answers. But as life progresses, as you get older, not everyone around you is patient to answer your questions. So, was this attitude seen as defiance at any point? Did you get everything your way as you carried on?
So, I mean, I think I managed to convince my way into it. So, kind of, I was very convincing to everyone around me. But there was once, when I started off in gymnast in the national team, my coach said, okay, you have the number 1 by miles. And then when the day of the competition, everything was fine. And then in the very last routine, I got stuck in the rope and lost half a point. And that exactly brought me into number 2. And I remember my coach came screaming and shouting, how come you never get stuck in the rope? And how did you miss the title? And blah, blah, blah. And I literally remember my mom coming in between us. And she said to the coach, what are you talking about? It's her first competition and she's already number 2 and we're going out to celebrate. Come join us. And, I think that was such an amazing, my parents were very, very enabling. My mom woke up at 5 a.m. to take me to competitions. And my dad was the funny one that got us excited before we go to bed. And my mom was like, don't get them excited before they go to bed and play horsey or whatever. A very fun and a lot of laughter. Birthday parties, my parents loved throwing, until today, I love throwing my kids crazy birthday parties with tons of games. And so, but that was the one example I remember where, I was like, I didn't like that feeling of disappointment that I disappointed my coach. So I wasn't a pleaser per se, but I didn't want to disappoint other people. So I always, and maybe it was her, maybe it was just me. I just wasn't happy that I didn't do the best that I could do. So I think that lesson was, First of all, you can't control everything.
Yeah.
And until today, I kind of, if I look in myself in the mirror and say, you gave it the best, and that's good enough. You can't control the end results. And yeah, I got stuck in the rope. It happens. So I think that at a very young age, I had this kind of, what's important is that you give it the best and enjoy the game.
Yeah.
What happens after doesn't really matter.
That's so true. And such a beautiful leadership thought right there, where the process is important, not the end result. And the more you focus on the process, that's where you improve as an individual. But as you continued into the corporate world, you moved and you got your MBA. Everywhere you were A plus as a student. But when you moved into the world of work, at home, your parents were really enabling. They gave you the best part of who you could be. But
Yeah.
the world outside is not the same. So, how did
So
you
I,
balance or find yourself in the world?
first of all, after school, for us, army is compulsory. And I was a leader in the army. So at a very young age, I had a crash course in leadership. I was a girl commander, which I was always a tomboy. So it was actually interesting that I was a girl commander. And I learned a lot about leadership. And I had, girls from tough backgrounds and how to talk to their heart and turn them around and make them great, soldiers. So I was in charge of basic training when they come in. So that was kind of a really important learning journey for me. And then I studied at university. And yes, I loved studying. It was kind of, I remember literally enjoying creating mind maps,
Mm.
okay, of each chapter that I'm told are still sold until today because it was just, I learned, in psychology, because that was what I was studying, how you kind of organize materials and memory. And it's all about creating, like I had a very visual memory. So it was about creating a mind map of the whole chapter. And it was just so sophisticated, these mind maps. I think I have them until today. And so I really enjoyed, I wasn't the fastest to grasp material. I remember I used to sit in the study and kind of really ask questions, but then I got it really deep so that when exams came and they were really difficult material, I had very creative ways in solving them. And then also in my career, I must admit the first 17 years I spent with Procter& and Gamble. And I write about Procter& and Gamble a lot in my book because I think it's a company, it's a very value-driven company. And, people, the essence of the culture is take care of the people and the business takes care of itself. And it's very, very prominent. So you need to spend 50% of your time taking care of both of your own development, going to courses, etc. And then when you develop, start interviewing and then start training. And I became actually a training junkie. I love training so much. So I trained everything from memorizing to people skills. And I must admit, I mean, it wasn't that all my bosses were perfect, but the culture was so prominent that I really thrived. I mean, I am very, very blessed to have seen what a company looks like when I gave 200% and I never felt like it was work. Some days we stayed until 4 a.m., ordered pizzas. We just loved it. It was just, we were writing business reviews and my boss at the time, Alex, said, okay, we're not going to waste 2 months like the other teams. We're going to try and crash it into 2 weeks. So literally we moved into the office with sleeping bags and we did business results and review in 2 weeks. And then we went back to the business and, we just took it with so much fun. It was just fun. And I very early knew that my purpose is about empowering people. So the company really allowed me both as, a trainer, but also in my role as a marketing director, doing campaign. I mean, I started off in India with Kadamba Raija. I hope I said it correctly. Keep
Yeah.
striding forward. A campaign we did for Whisper, which was all about women empowerment. So even in my work, and then later on, we brought it to the global team and created Run Like a Girl. So 17 years, it was very good culture. We had every time I was head of the women's network. I then opened the women's network in Russia and Singapore. And when we had any type of misconduct, it was handled so well, so swiftly. You know, people would come to me for two things. I mean, I was like, Dalia, I need to speak with you. It was like either you're pregnant and you want advice on parenting, or something at work, and I would help her, as head of the women's network. And I think, you know, I helped fire several people on misconduct, right? It was very swift. It was very clear. This is how it should be. This is what's not aligned with our PVPs, our purpose, value, and principles. And it was just very clear. Um, so I felt the whole world is like that, actually, and I think the first time I met a reality that's very, very different. I mean, I had it a little bit in PNG towards the end. I had one boss that was very, very difficult, and that was part of the reason I left PNG. But then I moved into another assignment, and that's when I got kind of the universe's gift, I call it, for learning what it could be, what leadership could be when it's not done properly, right? So I call it a gift. It took me a while to realize that it was a gift, because basically I got a bully boss. I can't describe him in any other ways, because he was very clearly and obviously a bully. Not only for me, towards me, towards everyone in the team, but I was the only woman, I mean, except for HR. And I also was a feisty little one, so I answered back, right? Like I know how to. And so we started this dance of death. Later on, I studied it and I did my thesis on bullying, and it's basically where he wanted my appreciation, and I was just not able to give him any appreciation. So that kind of, and I wanted his appreciation, and he was determined not to give me. And I became too reliant on external validation. I think my biggest learning there was, why should one person that's a narcissist and a bully, why should that person's point of view affect me in such a way?
Yeah.
And I allowed it. How did I allow it to affect me? I literally let him in, right? Mentally. Of course, there was no physical. That's the thing with abuse. When it's physical, it's very clear, right? But when it's not, when it's only mental or verbal, etc., then the boundaries are not as clear. And also for me, it took me a good 3 years to admit that that behavior is bullying, because I'm a strong woman, and you have all this cognitive dissonance. I'm not a victim of bullying, right? But basically 3 years, and yeah, I can share some stories there. I talk about it in the TEDs. One of the famous stories is when he would mock me on how I cried. I mean, he created a tissue box with my name on it, right? But there were many, many other stories. It was just, he was very determined to bring me down. He even told me, you're a pain in the ass. Everything I do, you keep bouncing back. And I said to him, what is this, a game to you? And he said, yeah. Why? Aren't you enjoying it? But I allowed myself to get into that swirl. And I think that's my biggest learning here,
Mm.
that you should not let anyone but yourself determine your happiness. Okay? Don't give anyone that credit. You're the only person that takes care of what's important for you.
That's powerful and beautifully said. But in my journey as a coach, and especially with women leaders, one thing I noticed, Dalia, is physically, we are blessed with a voice, but in many rooms, our voice is not heard. It's
Yeah.
either hushed up or we choose to hush up.
Yeah.
So, what is that one thing you learned, especially when the first part of your career goes on so beautifully and it just continues to empower you and you find that leadership just thriving? And at one point where you think it's all going perfectly, you meet
Yeah.
the one person who just pulls it all down. How do you get your voice heard?
It's interesting. My voice was never questionable. Like I always, I remember I was a very young ABM, and because I was doing fem care, feminine hygiene, my boss said, listen, you understand the business so much better than I do. I would love you to be the one presenting to the CEO in the visit. And I was the only associate brand manager, right? The junior level talking. And, I never felt any fear of authority because it's just a person with more experience. And I always was respectful, right? Because I can learn from anyone. But I never had this fear of authority. So I always spoke my mind. I always fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. I think I had a lot of psychological safety wherever I was to speak up. And then in this second, in this last assignment, it's not, I never stopped speaking up. Okay. And that was my issue in a way, right? Because I learned actually a few important lessons there. I think the first one, sometimes passion, right? Because passion is my middle name. It's my superpower. But sometimes, I needed to tame it to some extent so that, I would take people by the hand and show them what I'm passionate about, okay? Because my passion could be overwhelming to others. The second I learned is to choose my battles, because, I would argue everything. And I had actually an interesting case. I talk about it in the book. The head of the Australia business was a wonderful, wonderful person. But I always felt that he's conflict averse. And in one meeting, our boss, our bully boss, okay, I'll call him that, sorry. He asked us to create a plan on how we launch an extra big product. So we sat for, I don't know, 6 weeks on it. And we presented it and the budget associated, etc. And then my boss turns and he says, okay, I want you to present it to the president, but I want you to see how you do it with the existing budget. Okay. And I was like, are you kidding me? It's impossible. And I was getting all, and then we had a little break and my colleague said, it's futile, right? You're arguing and it's futile. Let me handle it, okay? Let's not fight it back yet. We'll find the time and place because I agree with you. It's impossible. And I was like, why aren't you speaking up? And he told me, I'm just choosing my battles. It will come in the right time. And I was super angry with him because I felt like he ditched me, right? He wasn't supporting me. And so we went back and we created a plan that we launched the product from within the existing budget. And what my Australian colleague did, he was actually mentored by the president. So he managed to work behind the scenes. And then on the day of the presentation, we presented the new plan. And then the president asked there, but tell me, do you really feel that it is possible? And the Australian leader said, I need to be very honest and say no. Okay, we were asked, so this is the best that we believe is possible. And he said, well, I'm sorry to say, I don't think it's possible. Go back and come back with a plan where you have incremental budget. And just like that, we got our plan, right? And I learned a really important lesson on kind of, sometimes you just need to choose when is the right time, right? To come back. And it's not that you give up, because I was really angry. You're giving up, blah, blah, blah. It's not that you give up. You're just smart about when and where. So I think that's the other thing about voice. I mean, do speak up. Never, especially when there's bullying. I think that's, the standard. And we see it from psychological research. 25% of employees at work are bullied. But an extra 25 see it very firsthand and they don't do anything about it. And the psychological impact for them is 75% of that as if they were bullied themselves. Okay. So that's to say, if you see it happening, if you stand up to it, where you see magic happen. For example, there's a famous story about the Clinton administration. No, it was actually Obama. They only had 20% women. And they noticed that every time they shared an idea, one of the males would take it over and kind of present it as himself, and you would forget where it came from. And they decided to gang up the 20%. And every time someone said a really smart idea, they would hype her up. Wow, that's such a smart. So no one will forget where the idea came from. And they later also, there was something about women are stopped mid-sentence more often than men. McKinsey research shows that it is perceived that women are less succinct than men. It's not true. Women on average speak the same number of words per sentence, okay, and in general. But it's perceived, okay, because socialization, encourages us or educated us that women are quieter. So when they do speak up, it does seem that they're less succinct. And so they are cut mid-sentence more often. And so when I was doing some training for our team in Australia, we kind of adopted this idea of speak up and just say, let her finish. Okay, so if you're in a meeting and you see someone else being cut mid-sentence, find the opportunity to say, thank you, but you were cut mid-sentence. Would you like to finish what you would say as a colleague? And it was such a powerful thing because the person didn't, even if he did it unintentionally, he noticed that he cut someone off. And it became such a let her finish. They ended up doing t-shirts with let her finish. So I think that's also part of the, having a voice and speaking up when you see wrongdoing. Okay, that's why there's so many women whistleblowers, right? But speak up to the level. You said, okay, if you're seeing that it's completely futile, you're not able to find a way to work. I think that's the other thing that I learned a little too late, that decisions are not made in the room when the data is shared. Decisions are made before, okay, in the run up towards that critical meeting. And I didn't realize that. I was coming and focusing only on sharing my points in that meeting while everyone was kind of doing the lobbying on the way, doing. And I have one story that I also talk about in the book where the first time I did, politically savviness, okay? Politically savviness doesn't need to be plain dirty. It's about being smart and strategic about getting your objectives. And for me, it was about there was a campaign I knew it needed to go on air, and I just did an alliance before we moved into the meeting. And so when the meeting came, most of those people spoke up and said, how much they believed in it. And so my boss had to kind of, because the head of sales wanted it and etc. So I think those were my key learning on voice and making sure you have it and you keep it, but be smart about it, be politically savvy about it, and choose your battles.
Yeah, because you've brought in some amazing thoughts here. One is psychological safety. The other one is putting out your voice. And the third most practical thing that I saw is let her finish, which I think is a very powerful phrase. But not everyone has that courage. Like you said, point out the bully when you see it, don't stay quiet. Not everyone
Mhm.
finds the courage. So, for women who can see it but don't point it out, and they don't do it because they don't feel psychologically safe in that space, what would you like to tell women when they get into the workspace, especially in a room which is mixed? What should they take along with them, and who should they be in such a room?
Mm. Yeah, well, first of all, courage is an interesting kind of concept, right? I Paul Polman used to be my boss in P&G and later the CEO of Unilever, and he talks about courage that it's the most misunderstood concept, that people believe that it's about making decisions, speaking up, in tough conversations. But he kind of talks about that courage comes from the Latin or the French word cœur, which means heart,
Yeah.
right? The really courageous leaders are those who lead from the heart. And I think what gave me courage in tough situation is knowing I'm not doing it for myself.
Mm.
So when I ended up going to the CEO and sharing some of the stories about my boss, in my mind, it was 3 years that I stayed in that, toxic environment. And I tried everything in my toolkit. I tried fight and flight and freeze. And, I tried everything that I knew and nothing was working, right? And at some stage, I realized that we were in a big meeting. I just realized that it was hurting my team already, that I needed to go, that there's something in the dynamic, that I needed to go. There was too much toxicity here. But I decided that I'm going to have an exit interview. And the reason I did is that I realized if I'm going to leave just like this, he would continue and find the next person to bully, right? And turn someone else's life miserable. And that's what gave me courage. The idea that I'm not doing it for myself. I literally said to myself, I'm doing it for the sake of all the women in the organization. And I spoke about this story in TED. Imagine, right? The TED has 250 million,
Yeah.
yeah, 250,000 views to date. I never thought that it would have so many views, but when I was going, it was a hall of 1,000 people, and I knew maybe 10,000 would view it. I was shaking, right? And I kept reminding myself that it's not a story about me or him in any way. It's a story about all those women out there, okay? That hopefully it would give them courage to speak up. Hopefully, and the beautiful thing is I got so many calls from women that got courage to do some kind of big move. For men that, I tell the story of how first time I cried in the office with my first boss, he told me, never be embarrassed. It's a sign of passion and not a weakness. And I had a call from a male colleague of mine who told me just after seeing your TED, my favorite employee came to the office and she started crying. And usually I would be stuck for words and, so embarrassed. But now I had a text answer. It's like, I see you're really passionate about it, how can I help? Right? So he was like so grateful. And I even had a call from this guy in Australia that told me, I saw your TED. I wanted to say thank you. I realize I'm an asshole. What do I do? Right? And we started working together in a coaching capacity. And he tried a new approach. He was a head of sales in a very big company. And he tried a new approach and he was shocked how love delivers so much better results than fear. And, he actually left his job and he's now the asshole eradicating coach. That's kind of, he decided to take it and make it his business. So, how do we drive courage? Remember, it's something bigger outside of you. Okay.
Yeah.
And remember, you have a responsibility. You were hired for your brains and your wit and your skills, and you have a responsibility to wrong the rights and to be smart about it. Find a mentor, consult how to do it right.
Yeah.
Maybe your mentor does it for you in some way if it's too politically kind of challenging, but don't be silent. I think you will have a hard time taking it in. And, you're senior enough. And even if you're completely junior, I mean, you can change the environment to the better. So do speak up because, worst case that can happen, you get fired, but it's better that then you go and find the right place to work than you work in a place where you're not able to be yourself and not able, to I think for me that was the biggest learning. Lead like a girl is really being able to bring your strengths. And people ask me, okay, so if I'm in a bully and do I immediately leave?
Yeah.
And my answer is no.
No.
Stay there 6 months, try and see if it's really kind of, if you're able to bring your strengths to the workplace, then stay. If you're not able to bring your strengths to the workplace, it's not the right place. They don't deserve you. Walk away. That
Yeah.
would be my conclusion.
Yeah. And like you said, it's very important to choose your battles. There's
Yes.
no point battling in a place where you know it's not going to take you anywhere. And you spoke about courage, you spoke about fear. For the world, both these emotions were foremost when 5 years back the pandemic took all of us inward. A
Mm,
space where we all went into reflection, but the basic emotion was fear. And soon
mm,
it got converted into courage of facing it. This too
mm.
shall pass, is what most of us told each other. All of us
Yeah.
took lessons. Sadly, many of us have forgotten it. But what has been the biggest takeaway for you from the pandemic, Dalia?
Yeah, we spoke just before we started recording, but for me, it's kind of, it's so clear that the universe is trying to tell us something very, very loudly, right? The global warming was there to teach us that we're not alone. We're not here only for ourselves. If we only take care of ourselves, that won't help ourselves either, right? So global warming, you can be recycling and doing everything right, but the person next to you isn't, and the situation deteriorates. So that was the first thing. And then COVID came, and you can take care of yourself, right? But if you're not taking care of your neighbor, if you're not taking care of the world, if you're not, we basically have this idea of mutual responsibility. And for me, COVID actually was a beautiful period in a weird way, because I was doing my master's degree. So first 6 months, I was very much in a reflective studying. We just moved to a new house, and we were so lucky because it was quite a big one. So we could kind of just enjoy the house, and the kids were just finishing school, and we had quality time with them. And we would have family Zoom games, with our extended family. I even had my daughter's 18th birthday party on Zoom. And, the day of the birthday, she started crying because she was really sad that it's her first legal drink and she's going to have it, and we organized and we said, okay, we need to up the ante. And I decided to call a famous singer and invite him to sing on Zoom. And it wasn't acceptable at the time, and he agreed. And that was for him his very first Zoom performance. And we had about 200 people online, and it was lovely. And everyone was dancing, as if no one's watching. And it was just we just learned that when life serves you lemon, how do you make, a damn amazing margarita, lemon margarita. So I think I've always been a lemonade, take lemons, make them a lemonade type of person, but that became very, clear. But there was a lot of fear. And sadly, this continues. I mean, for me, the fear of the pandemic and the reflection was one, and now I'm in another. I mean, for me, we're in World War III. Not everywhere is understanding it yet, but it is. There's kind of a hate pandemic, a cancel culture. People are just, hate pandemic. I think that's the way to call it. And I'm in the epicenter of it here where I live. I've experienced existential fear that I didn't know is possible, when you're in your safe room and safe in your home, and people can come and kidnap you or rape you. Or, I mean, I didn't think that exists in the 21st century, and it is all around the world. And you can even be in California in your beautiful home, and wildfires will consume you. So I think there's a cosmic fire, and in an interesting way, you will enjoy that. When I studied Ayurveda, I actually learned about how important fire is, but why fire is always balanced with oil, with water, right? You take the chili and you put it in oil to balance it out. Now the water is the feminine energy. Okay, so there's too much masculine energy. There's the wounded masculinity, and it's raging. And while fire can be good because it transforms food and it's the power of transformation, when it's wildfire, it's bad. When it's not balanced with the feminine energy, right? So I think we'll close off, this hour by it all. I didn't intend when I wrote Lead Like a Girl, it was really focused on, how to succeed in the workplace. But as I kind of reflect on the state of the world in the last since the pandemic and before, we must wake up to what the universe is trying to tell us. We are part of one humanity.
Yeah.
And if we're not here for each other, what are we? Okay, in a nili-mili. So if I don't have me, who do I have? But if I'm only for myself, what am I?
Yeah.
Right? So on the one hand, yes, you own your happiness. Okay, and you own taking care of yourself. But if you only take care of yourself, who are you? And I think that's what Lead Like a Girl is all about.
Yeah, yeah. And bringing that feminine energy now is the need of the hour for sure. But what
Yeah.
I'm curious about, Dalia, as I see you, is that Om on your chain, the
Mhm.
pendant that you're wearing. It's the primordial sound for us in India, and Om is also a breathing technique that we have. And it's a very auspicious word for us. And what is your connection with it? I'm, I'm just curious.
So I'm hyperactive. Okay. It's funny. I only identified myself. I only did the tests recently, and all my friends are like, but of course, right? I process information 6 times more than the average. I'm always kind of, and um, a few years back, so 15 years back, I started practicing yoga. And for me, that was transformational. That was the only time where I stopped and, focused only on myself and the breathing and reflection and, even stopping the thoughts, okay, those 6X thoughts. And it became so powerful. When I learned something that I'm really passionate about, I became a teacher. So I became a yoga teacher 10 years back in Singapore. I feel, it really complements, I started in marketing and now I do organizational psychology and all the spiritual world of yoga. I also do theta healing and other things. I always joke and say my feet are in the ground, but my head is in the cloud. I really like the science, even my coaching course, I did brain-based coaching. Okay. I like this, connecting east and west and,
Yes.
left brain and right brain. So yeah, I just saw it on a friend and she made it in India and I kind of hinted very loudly to my husband and he made that for me for our wedding anniversary. And, once a day at least, without even noticing, every time I touch it, I kind of condition myself to say, slow down, breathe. Okay, because I'm very much in the doing, but the doing is not worth anything if you don't spend time reflection, right? Action without reflection is futile, right? It's all about really spending time. And so for me, I teach yoga once a week here in my village. I teach yoga in our retreats, in our Lead Like a Girl retreats that we started running. And yeah, people are quite surprised because I'm such a, high power, executive. And this is my way to kind of ground, because I think that's the whole story, right? This is the masculine energy, the feminine energy, the left brain, the right brain,
Yeah.
because that's, the only definition of happiness is wholeness, says Helen Keller. So for me, yoga is part of this wholeness.
Yeah. And it's also the being and completely accepting the being of who you are. Very
Yeah, completely.
beautiful. And as we come to a conclusion with this conversation, a normal question I ask is three life lessons that you'd
Mm,
like to leave us with.
wow. Yeah, one thing that kind of defined me is the don't take no for an answer. Okay. I mean, my book was rejected, I don't know how many times before it landed. And, everything I've done in my life, and I'm just moved into this beautiful house and I'm just looking out on the ocean. It's always my 10 fingers. I didn't take anything from my parents from when I was 10, because I never took no for an answer. You close the door, every door that closes is another window that opens. So, for me, that's just find your way, the smart way, just like water, to go even to the toughest surfaces. So I think that's the first one. The second, and this is more for parenting kind of a thought, but be there for the moments that count and make the moments that you're there count. Your kids will forgive you if you miss a dinner once in a while, but try and be there for the important moments, right? The birthdays, the plays. And I went to hoops to be there for the, important moments. But even more important, and this is going back to the being, make the moments that you're there count. So I was very conscious about coming in, closing the phone, putting it in my bag, and for 2 hours, no one will die. I am with my kids. I will go back to the computer and solve all your issues in 2 hours. Don't call me. I'm there. 6:30 to 8:30, I'm not available. And I think that's a very one we forgot because we have too much, this addiction to the phone. And me too. I also get there, but I remind myself, right, to be present, because it's the present. The presence is the present, right? So that's kind of, the second. And I think connected to that, and that's kind of my life motto, is the thought of have an idea of where you're heading. Okay, meaning set goals once a year. I sit down and I write my vision and where I want to be. And that's why I'm sitting here looking at the ocean. This is a dream that I had for years, right? And my heart is bursting because I'm here. And I always set goals, okay? So have an idea of where you're heading, but don't forget to enjoy the view and the way, okay?
Yeah.
Meaning sometimes we're so obsessed with the purpose and we're not realizing that happiness is not getting what you want. It's wanting what you already have,
Yeah.
right? And I think gratitude is a very, very big life lesson for me. I mean, every moment, every challenge, I've learned to embrace it as a gift. It's the universe telling me there's a skill I haven't acquired. That's it. Failure is just a skill I haven't yet acquired. So I think that's another kind of important life. So have an idea of where you're heading, but don't forget to enjoy the view and the way.
Yeah, powerful, powerful. And what you just said, failure is just another skill that you need to acquire, is a beautiful way to look at how you look at life itself. Because life is constantly speaking to us like the universe and the world is. But most of us fail to pick those conversations. And
Yeah.
that's where reflective moments tell you where you are and who you can be. And I think keeping that girl in you alive helps you connect, because I loved how you started saying, as a girl, I was unstoppable. And I think as girls, all of us are unstoppable. We feel that we own the universe. And that's an amazing way to lead our lives. Thank you so much, Dalia, for this beautiful conversation. And
Thank you, Rashmi. Lovely being here.
love the way, because you and I stands for the uniqueness and individuality each of us carries. It doesn't matter where we go in life, but sharing our story in different points of life helps us reflect on how far we have come from where we started. And you never know who needs to listen to that conversation.
We say you save one soul, you save the universe. So if one person decides to take a brave move and change their life to the better, for us, we did our job. Thank
Yes.
you, Rashmi. Thank you so much.
God bless you and continue to inspire.
Thank you.
With that, we complete this episode of You and I with Rashmi Shetty. Do let us know if you know inspirational people whose story needs to be heard. You can write in at rashmi.thirdeye@gmail.com. That is rashmi.thirdeye@gmail.com.